The story you are about to hear is one of the most disturbing cases in recent memory. It is a case that sounds more like the plot of a horror movie than something that unfolded in real life. A frantic 911 call in the middle of the night. A man found lying naked, stabbed over 20 times. A woman drenched in blood, trembling and barely able to explain what had just happened. And a third person, the suspected killer, vanished into the shadows. What began as an evening of drinking, intimacy, and a chilling game of Ouija would end with a brutal murder that would haunt Spokane, Washington, forever. It was just before 6 o'clock in the morning on August 13, 2020, when dispatchers in Spokane received a call that would leave even veteran emergency operators shaken. On the line was a woman named Haley, and her voice was frantic, panicked, and filled with terror. She told the dispatcher that someone had been stabbed. The screams and confusion in the background painted a picture of absolute chaos. When pressed for details, Haley said something that sent a chill down the spine of the operator. Her boyfriend, Edward Martinez, had just stabbed her ex-husband, Anthony Bryan, and Anthony was bleeding to death on the floor. The dispatcher asked the most urgent question. "Where is Edward now?" Haley, sobbing uncontrollably, answered, "He ran away." The scene of horror. When officers arrived at the quiet residential home, they stepped into a nightmare. Inside the bedroom lay 25-year-old Anthony Bryan, naked, bleeding profusely, his body covered in stab wounds. Medics rushed in and worked frantically to save him, but the injuries were catastrophic. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned paramedics. Anthony had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest, stomach, and back. Haley, still in her robe, stood nearby trembling, her body splattered in blood. She tried to explain to police what had happened, though her words came out broken and shaky. According to her, Edward Martinez had fled after the stabbing. Just weeks earlier, she had met him online, driven down to Sacramento to pick him up, and brought him back to Spokane to live with her and Anthony. Their arrangement was unusual, almost baffling to outsiders. Though Anthony was her ex-husband, he continued to live in the same house, and the three of them were involved in an open, tangled relationship. On the night of the murder, the three had been drinking gin, smoking THC concentrates, and playing with a Ouija board. Haley recalled that Anthony had been attempting to summon a demon, one he called Zozo. What began as an evening of reckless indulgence and bizarre rituals descended into horror when jealousy and rage suddenly ignited. The stabbing, according to Haley, what started as consensual intimacy quickly spiraled into chaos. Edward Martinez became paranoid and consumed with jealousy. She said he suddenly snapped, picking up a knife and attacking Anthony with terrifying ferocity. Anthony, caught off guard and defenseless, screamed for him to stop, but Edward did not stop. He chased Anthony around the room, stabbing him over and over again as Anthony tried desperately to escape. Haley tried to intervene, but she was powerless against the storm of rage consuming Edward. In desperation, she pretended to be hurt, hoping to distract him long enough to save Anthony's life. But it was no use. Anthony collapsed under the relentless assault. The room was filled with screams, the smell of blood, and the chilling sound of a life being violently taken. The search for Edward. As medics worked on Anthony, police launched a manhunt for Edward Martinez. A K-9 unit and drones were deployed to calm the area. Neighbors were questioned, streets were searched, and officers braced themselves for the possibility that Edward, still armed, might strike again. Meanwhile, Edward made a phone call to his mother in California, using a stranger's borrowed phone. He told her he was running for his life. He claimed he was hiding in an alley near Wesley Avenue in Spokane. Within hours, he was located and arrested without incident. Strangely, the young man who had just committed one of the most brutal murders the city had ever seen appeared disturbingly calm. The confession back at the station. Edward sat alone in the interrogation room. Surveillance cameras recorded him mumbling to himself. "I'm tired of being a man," he whispered. "Doesn't mean I should have taken his life, but I just wanted to see the alien." His words revealed a disturbing glimpse into his fractured state of mind. When detectives entered the room, Edward initially asked for a lawyer, but the moment they informed him that Anthony was dead and that he was being charged with murder, he changed his mind. "I know what I did," he said. "I don't need a lawyer." What followed was a confession that stunned even experienced investigators. Edward admitted everything. He said he had been struggling mentally for a long time, that he felt like there was someone else in his head, and that the events of that night had pushed him to the breaking point. According to Edward, the three of them had been drinking and trying to initiate group sex. He claimed he could not perform sexually because of the alcohol and felt humiliated. Then, Anthony, still naked, started rubbing his feet. That, Edward said, was the moment something inside him snapped. The methodical attack. Edward described how he went into the bathroom, thinking about grabbing a knife. But when he did not find one there, he went to the living room. On the mantel above the fireplace, he spotted a small folding utility knife. He picked it up and hid it between his buttocks so the others would not see it. Returning to the bedroom, he sat quietly, waiting. Then, using Haley's phone as a distraction, he turned on the flashlight to get their attention. When they looked away, he pulled out the knife and plunged it into Anthony's back. He stabbed again and again, the rage inside him boiling over into violence. Anthony begged for him to stop. He tried to run, but Edward chased him, stabbing relentlessly until Anthony collapsed. By the time it was over, Anthony had suffered 20 stab wounds, 14 to the chest and abdomen, 5 to the back, and 1 to the arm. When detectives asked why he did it, Edward chillingly admitted that stabbing Anthony gave him a rush, a feeling not unlike the time he had once snapped a wounded deer's neck while hunting. For a brief moment, he said, it gave him a thrill. Then the remorse set in. The aftermath. Anthony Bryan was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds were too severe. He died shortly after arrival. He was just 25 years old, a corrections officer with his whole future ahead of him. Edward, just 19 at the time of the killing, was charged with first-degree premeditated murder. During questioning, he admitted that he had considered the attack in advance, that he had deliberately gone to fetch the knife, and that he knew exactly what he was doing. He even confessed that after the murder, he felt regret because, despite the violence, Anthony had actually been a good friend to him. When the case went to trial, prosecutors presented the jury with a harrowing timeline. They described the bizarre Ouija board session, the spiral into jealousy and rage, and the methodical way Edward planned the stabbing. The evidence was overwhelming: the knife, the blood, the confession, and Haley's eyewitness account. Edward's defense team argued that he had been under the influence of alcohol and THC, that he was mentally unstable, and that he had snapped in a moment of passion. But the jury did not buy it. They saw the premeditation in his actions, the way he retrieved the knife, concealed it, and waited for the right moment to strike. In April 2023, Edward Martinez was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Reflection: this case is haunting not only because of its brutality, but also because of how ordinary moments spiraled into tragedy. A Ouija board game, a night of partying, a strange love triangle, and then, in a matter of minutes, a man lost his life in a frenzy of violence. Anthony Bryan's family will forever live with the loss of a son, a brother, and a friend. Haley, traumatized, must carry the memory of witnessing the brutal murder in her own home. And Edward Martinez, once a young man with his life ahead of him, will spend decades behind bars haunted by what he did. He has since filed an appeal, but the courts upheld his sentence. His words in interrogation still linger like an echo of madness. I just wanted to see the alien. The Ouija board murder of Edward Martinez is more than just a shocking story. It is a chilling reminder of how quickly drugs, jealousy, and psychological instability can turn deadly. What began with laughter, intimacy, and a game meant for fun ended in horror. One man dead, one woman scarred for life, and one young man condemned to spend much of his life in a prison cell. This case shows us that the line between reality and nightmare can be far thinner than we want to believe. Thank you for joining us in this true crime documentary. Remember, violence is never the answer. Stay safe, stay aware, and never ignore the signs.